Welcome to Phonogenics 101, a Riotboy production hosted by Jeremy Gloff. The podcast where people who love music discuss albums track by track. Please hit subscribe, and if you'd like to support this podcast, patreon.com/Jeremy Gloff or Venmo @Jeremy Gloff. And now, on to the music. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Phonogenics 101. I'm your host, Jeremy Gloff from Tampa, Florida. This is the podcast where we take an album and we talk about it track by track. Tonight, I have a very special guest. This is someone I listened to on my record player when I was 7 years old. Maybe shouldn't have been listening to those songs when I was 7 years old. But then I grew up and I still followed her music into my adulthood. And I'm so pleased to present to you all the legend herself, Brenda Bennett. Woohoo!
Hey, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Brenda, you've been on the podcast before. We talked about your work with Vanity 6 and with Apollonia 6.
Right.
And tonight, I'm going to do a little screen share here for this one. We are going to talk about your debut solo album. Let me see if I can do this with the Zoom. Here we go. So everyone can see the cover. There it is.
Oh, right.
A Capella, the debut solo album by Brenda Bennett. Tonight we are going to talk about it track by track, hear some of the stories, and have a great time. So, of course my screen gets stuck. There we go. All right. Everything looks good? All right. So Brenda, you came back in 2010 with this album, correct?
Yes.
I'm going to tell you a story first, and then I'm going to have you tell a story. But I remember the day I was waking up for work, and it was just like that game of telephone where all the phones buzzing, all these texts are coming, and everyone was so excited because Brenda was back. And you created a firestorm in the internet community because there was just this little video of you singing "Shaky Ground" with Ken Lyon.
Right.
And you were on stage with two other women singing, and there was just one part where you're like, whoop! And it was like, that was the Brenda. And we all were just playing that little part over and over, but we were so excited to see, like, this is, 2008, 2009. So this is before Facebook, when everyone could really reconnect, and everyone always wondered, where's Brenda Bennett? So there you were, the looks were still there, the voice was still there, and we were so thrilled. And then a year later, this solo album comes out, and everyone just went crazy. I mean, I played this album just as much as the Vanity 6 album, just as much as Apollonia 6. This album, A Capella, a huge part of my life. So I'm excited to talk about it track by track, and I'm going to turn it over. What led up to this album? What brought you back to the stage?
What brought me back to the stage? Well, I had started in the music business with Ken Lyon and Tombstone blues band, and it'd been quite a while. I was in a couple of incarnations of that band, and it'd been quite a while since I had even spoken with Kenny and some of the other people. And incidentally, one of the things that happened was one of the guitar players, Paul DiChiera, fabulous, incredible guitar player, he passed away. So they held a sort of memorial concert where Kenny, a man in the area here, a drummer, really good drummer, excuse me, Don Culp, and another musician in the circuit here in New England, Rick Belair. The three of them kind of worked together and decided, or thought that perhaps we, let's do something for Paul. Let's contact everybody that he had worked with through the years, and the different incarnations, the different bands that he was in, and different musical setups, and let's do a memorial show for him. We'll have, people from this band that still there and people from that band and so on. And one of the things they certainly wanted to do was to have Tombstone
Right.
uh, playing. So I was raising my son at the time, and this is one of those times where I had started thinking about, ooh, he's getting older now, and maybe I could let me start thinking about my music stuff. Am I going to step back into this? Am I going to get my feet wet? And what am I going to do? And just thinking about it, and my father used to say to me, be careful what you're thinking because this is listening. And if it's something you really want, you better make sure that you do want it because you just might get it. So, and lo and behold, I had been starting to think about this music kind of thing in my life, and it hadn't been in my life for quite a while because I'd given up my career to raise my son. So I get a phone call from Rick Belair wanting to know, telling me, what they had decided to do, and asked if I would be interested in being a part of the Tombstone portion of the show. And I said, absolutely, I would do it because I felt really bad and was heartbroken that Paul had passed away. So I said, yeah, let's do it. So I did. My brother Bruce played bass. Um, Kenny played guitar, and Don Culp actually played drums. And Mark Tabor,
Oh, I love
yeah,
his piano playing.
he's amazing. He's just so there, in the pocket. Um, he played piano. He was one of the original members, and that was kind of a sort of a little precarious thing too, is because there wasn't that many original members left. But who also agreed to do it, and it went over really well. People loved it, and next thing I knew, a couple of weeks later, I got a phone call again saying, "Hey, we've been talking." This was between Don Cope and Rick Belair, not so much with Kenny. Kenny didn't really know anything about it quite yet. And that was that they said, "Why, Pops?" Everybody called him Pops because there's so many people in this area that have gone through his microphone with him on stage through a band of his, or just because he was really good about saying, if you were in the house to watch him do a show that night and he knew it and he knew or he knew of you, or if you were another musician that somebody that he knew said to Kenny, oh, so and so is here, you ought to have him sit in, he would do it. And there was a lot of people who worked with him at different times down through the years and went on to do stuff on their own, and some of them did really well. um, Scott Hamilton, famous jazz player, saxophonist, he started working with Kenny. um, I don't know if you remember a band, Duke Belair, Duke Robillard, excuse me, Duke Robillard,
Okay.
um, blues guitarist. And he started with Kenny back in the day, and he's done really well for himself um, nationally. And so there's been a lot of people who have come and gone through Pops and
Uh-huh.
his stage. So anyway, they had said to me, why wait until Ken passes away to do something like this for him that we did for Paul? Why don't we do something now that he can be a part of? So I said, that's a good idea. That'd be really good. And they said, well, would you be in on it? Would you be willing to be in on it? And I said, sure. So we did, and it turned out really, really well. There was over 1,000 people there,
Wow.
and there was different incarnations of things that he did. He started out as a folk guitarist, a folkie, and then it went into
There's the record.
there it is, there it is. Oh my gosh. Um, and He did a Celtic band, Pendragon, for a while. Certainly, a good portion of time he did his blues bands, and that's when I worked with him the most. It was the Tombstone Blues Band. So because of it, they felt there was really good momentum with the reaction, and they started getting phone calls of wanting to hire the band to perform. And so they asked if I would stay with the band and keep performing. And I thought, yes, I'll do it as long as I'm having a good time. I'll do it. So I did. And this is where um, some of my original material that I'd been writing came up. Kenny wanted to know if I had any originals. And that was one of the things I loved about working with that band right in the very beginning is that when we went to Electric Lady Studios to record the first album for CBS Records, it was mostly original music.
Right.
And one of the songs on the album was an original song that I had written. And I liked that. I liked the idea of that. I liked doing original music, having that outlet to do it. So Kenny asked if I had any, and I said, well, I got a few songs. So I played him a few songs, and he said, okay, we'll use that one. And next thing I knew, okay, let's use this one. Or what else have you got?
Right.
And before I knew it, we were doing 4 or 5 of my numbers. And one of the girls, the 3 girls that you mentioned that you saw the Shaky Legs video, um, Lori LaCale, that's her name. She goes by Lori Sylvia now. But Lori LaCale asked me if I had any tracks recorded of these songs, and I hadn't. And she said, "Oh, you ought to do that. You ought to, put them on, put them down, put some recordings down on these." And I said, "Yeah, that sounds like a nice idea," but I didn't take her up on it at first because I really came right down to it. I couldn't afford studio time. I was a single mom, and most of everything was concentrated financially on raising my son and taking care of the both of us and so on. So we finally had a talk, and she said, I would do this for you for nothing. You've done so much to help me, and been such an inspiration that I'd be willing to do it for you for nothing. So and I had to think, okay, well, why am I doing this? I if it was just a matter of recording in some way these songs so that I didn't forget them, that because I could set up my phone or my own little sort of recorder kind of thing at home and do that, as opposed to going into a studio setup. And so I had to think about, well, if she's willing to do this, how much of this project is she willing to really go into doing? And what am I going to do with it? So the more I thought of it, this was when you mentioned before Facebook, and it was, and here I go. I know I'm going to not remember. FaceTime? Was it FaceTime? No, what was it
My
before?
MySpace was before.
MySpace.
Yeah, MySpace.
MySpace. MySpace had come into being, and things were starting to happen within the technical worlds for recording where you could record yourself and make your own album and put it out, get it out there. And I just thought, I don't, I'm sure there must be some fans out there somewhere that would remember me or might be interested in hearing something.
Here we are.
So I thought, all right, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And here was my first opportunity to do the whole show per se, from soup to nuts. I wrote the material, I arranged it, I produced it, I played on it instrument wise, of course I sang on it, but I put the band together that backed me, the musicians that came in back. My brother played bass on the album. Mark played piano, Mark Tabor. I had two great guitar players that came in and did lead stuff for me, and some rhythm stuff. I'm basically a rhythm player. and I played Gertrude, my acoustic guitar, and I played Maya, my 12-string guitar, my 12-string Martin. Bruce had gifted me on my birthday, and and I played percussion, but and I thought, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm just going to do it, and I'm going to do it as best as I possibly can. This is my first shot at doing everything on my own, and I felt that I could do it, given the opportunity to do something like that. I felt that I'd been around it and done enough of it,
Right.
between working with Ken in the studio, working with some friends on in their little studio setups, certainly working with Prince. Um, and then of course I was living in London for a few years and working with Dee Harris in the studio with our stuff that we were writing and recording at the time. So I felt like, yeah, I think I can do this. So I got excited about it, and I talked to Laurie and said, if we're going to do this, this is what the thoughts that I have. I really want to make a go at putting something, a decent product out. Is what I
Right.
try and do. And so that's kind of what we did. And that's how A Capella came around.
So I didn't realize this, but some of the a cappella songs were being played by Tombstone before you recorded it as a solo album.
Yeah. Let me see. Follow Me certainly was.
Okay.
Um, what else we got on here?
Now I never knew that, and that's pretty cool.
Crimea River, Jemima, and Sidewalk Messiah.
Wow, I would love to hear those Ken Lyon versions. Um,
I I don't think there's anything recorded anywhere, but
wow.
you know, in a live setup. So yeah,
Did you? I feel like we have in common that we both used CD Baby at that time. Is that what you used when you did the album?
yeah.
Yeah. It's
That was one of the things. I think CD Baby hadn't really been out for very long with their
right.
services, and one of the people who had been in that recording, CBS recording Tombstone segment, John Polche, he he told me about CD Baby. He did not. He was one of the people who did the album, went into the studio with us in New York and recorded the album. He had done some gigs with us, some shows with us previous to the recording, but he had a religious epiphany, a religious experience not too long after we finished recording that album, and
Okay.
he went off and became a very lucrative, very successful Christian artist.
Okay.
Yeah, and he was the one that told me about CD Baby when I was talking to him, telling him that um, I was going to start this project and asked him his ideas, opinions, because I really being away from everything, raising my son for so long. I mean, I literally, in one of the songs on here, I mentioned how my guitar was all dusty and rusty, and
Right.
and it was the strings were rusty because I didn't play it, I didn't touch it for I didn't do anything musically. I listened to music,
Right.
and but I didn't do it. I wasn't doing anything musically myself.
So a question that I thought of is, you did a second solo album a few years later, and you had a lot of material that was on the second album. It was songs from your D. Harris days, different unreleased stuff. What made you decide to choose the songs for a cappella? Because I feel like it's such a group of songs. So what made you decide to choose those songs and not some of the other ones that ended up on the second album? Was it just you felt like these were the group of songs?
Yeah. First of all, the ones that I was doing with Tombstone, I felt was probably that's the reason why we started the whole project to begin with.
Right.
And I got to put my other eyes on here. Excuse me for a moment. And then as time was going, as we were getting into the first song that we recorded when the first day in the studio in Laurie's studio recording, we did Sidewalk Messiah. It's the
Okay.
last song on the album, and it's the first song that we recorded. Um, And I was kind of writing some things as we were getting into the recording.
Okay.
Say Love I had written, but it wasn't anything I ever did. It's not so, I had written it when I didn't stay with that incarnation of Tombstone for very long.
Right.
Uh, Things started to get a little too crazy, as they can in bands,
Right.
and I wasn't having fun anymore.
Right.
So, and I had said I'd stay as long as I was having fun, and when it was time to go, I walked away. I just, okay, it's time for me to go. So, Say Love, I did not do with Tombstone. It definitely wasn't a Tombstone song.
Okay.
Child of Light, the same for the same reason. Burden of Desire, I wrote while this album was being recorded. Cry Me a River, and Shattered Dreams, I wrote while we were recording this. Um, and I just, to have selected, probably because it was the most recent
Right.
more than anything else. And I was excited about them, and I was excited about doing this project. I was excited about being in the studio recording because I love being in the studio recording.
Right.
I don't care if I never ever be on a stage again, as long as I can still go into a studio and record. I love it.
Well, I'm going to embarrass you for a second, but people that might not be familiar with this album and the work you've done since your comeback here, you're definitely a poet, you're a producer, you're a musician. So I hope this podcast gives people the opportunity to really explore the 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 depth of your intelligence and your
Oh,
talent because there's a lot there. I mean, the thing I loved when I listened to this album is it really felt like this is an introduction to who this person is now. It
yeah.
wasn't there wasn't nostalgia on this album, and it was interesting. I don't know how to say this sensitively, but I grew up loving a lot of the Prince, especially you and Jill. Like you and Jill were as a kid were my favorites, and then you both were producing the best work you'd ever produced in the 2010s. Like this
Oh,
album to me, I love it as much as anything on Vanity Six. But I feel like when Prince passed away, things started going through the Prince lens again. And this album, the A Capella, you were just completely independent Brenda Bennett. And I feel like this is more of a throwback to almost the Tombstone days and the Prince days.
oh, well, oops, excuse me.
Does that make any sense at all?
It does. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Because there was just that window, where just people were making work but not really talking about the Prince years. And I enjoyed that era because it was really a focus just on your music, who you were as a person right then, and I love that. And then of course I
But
love oh yeah, go ahead.
um, no, finish your thought. Go ahead.
I was just saying I did love, then on the second album you do start revisiting those things and talking about that time of your life and getting nostalgic. And that's another I can't wait to talk about that album next month.
Well, that album, of course, don't forget, Prince had passed away.
Right.
So, not to get too much ahead of ourselves, that has a lot to do with having done that second album.
Right.
But going back to a cappella, I've been writing songs on and off since I was about 12 years old. And of course, like a lot of people did, I started out writing poetry. My parents were musicians, um, and I got my hands on a guitar and was teaching myself how to play from Beatles songbooks.
Right.
I was learning different chords from Beatles songbooks, and the Beatles were my music for me. It gave me chicken skin the first time I heard them, and I just never looked back after I heard them.
Right.
Um, one of the things I liked about them was the simplicity of their music, and um, it was very attracting, and I love the story behind the lyrics, and it was different compared to so many other things that had been going on that I'd listened to. My
Right.
mom always exposed my brothers and I to a lot of different music because she had more of an eclectic taste with music, pardon me, and where my father was a purist with being a country, uh, he was a country musician. So I grew up with different things, hearing different music. And when, I just started questioning myself one day, can I write something? How do you, if they can do it, I can do it,
Right.
and so I started writing some poetry stuff. And I think that with a lot of people going into their teenage years, especially girls, sometimes would get into writing poetry. And guys, I can't really say just girls now that I think of it. There was a number of guys that were writing poetry, and then when I got my hands on a guitar and I was learning some guitar changes, I started thinking, well, let me try and do this,
Right.
a song. So I've been writing songs on and off since I started messing around with it when I was about 12 years old. And I really didn't take it seriously in terms of um, wanting to do it professionally.
Right.
I thought it was glamorous and it could be a lot of fun. And there was a lot of times if my mother was watching something on television that it was had something to do with a musical show and going off and performing somewhere, I always found it very interesting. And um, kind of like, oh, what's that? But I never really thought inside for myself that it was something that a it was attainable, um, or even B, or maybe I should switch the A and B's, that if it was something I wanted to do,
Right.
I didn't have that kind of real need, that real kind of, this is what I wanted, that kind of passion where that's what I want to do. And it's the only thing I want to do. And I'm going to do it until I bust. If I don't, I'm going to bust if I don't do it. So it never, I think maybe because I was around music all my life growing up, that
Right.
it was a part of my life. So I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to be a painter. That's what I really wanted to do. But fate has, a way of changing things. And um, that's what happened with me. I just kind of was guided somewhere else. And, and I did it. I did it purely for fun at first, and then as time went on and I found out, oh, I can make some money doing this.
Right.
Maybe this is a good idea to do this for a livelihood. But also within those years, seeing a lot of people, a lot of friends who had the attitude and really had the passion that I'm gonna do this or bust. You know, they had been putting so much into it for so long to try and get a break,
Right.
and I was very fortunate. Um, Most breaks, seeming breaks that I had, they were opportunities that were given to me. And I took them at the time and said, yes, why not? What do I get to lose? I'll give it a try. And things kind of, I never had any idea ever that I was going to wind up being on stage on the opening up for Queen in
Right.
1974. Queen and Mata Hoople, nor did I, and everything else that went on with all of that, being on stage, opening up for Edgar Winter and his White Trash and Steppenwolf and Michael Urbaniak, Aerosmith, and it goes on and on. And or working with Prince one day,
Right.
it wasn't it just happened. I guess it was in the cards for me. That's what fate or destiny had in store for me, and that's the path I walked.
It's so interesting because, us as the fans, we saw just a little piece of Brenda through those songs on the Vanity 6 and Apollonia album. But this comeback album for you really framed you as a storyteller and a songwriter. And you did say that you wish to be a painter, but with this album, you are a painter because each song really, through the words, paints a story and paints a picture. So,
No,
you know, let's talk about the album cover a little bit. That was your friend that did the artwork, correct? I'll show it again.
yeah,
Let me see. Oh, we'll share the screen. There we go. So what's the story behind the album cover?
A Capella is also before. I mean, a cappella, what does a cappella mean? Um, and everybody's first idea that has ever heard the word a cappella knows it's people who sing without instrumentation. Um, and it kind of started, many, many years ago, centuries ago, as a situation before instruments started playing music. There was always singing.
Right.
And also, one of the meanings of it is stands alone. I think there's an Italian word for that. Um, and that's kind of how a cappella was derived or turned into a cappella, the words a cappella, the word a cappella. And this is a solo album for me. It's my first solo effort at doing a total project on my own. Everything else that I had done in music up to that point had been as a part of somebody else's outfit, somebody else's situation, somebody else's band, working with Prince and his organization. Um, it was always a part of. Whereas this one here, I was standing alone on my own, doing my thing. And I knew I could do it. I felt I could. I mean, right from the beginning of when that song, the song that I wrote was on the Tombstone album for CBS Records, it woke me up to a different aspect of the whole thing where, holy cow, I guess I really can I can accomplish something with this,
Right.
on my own. And that's kind of why the the artwork is like a stained glass window. It's kind of like almost like a stained glass. Somebody that I was working with um, really got involved with doing fractal art,
Okay.
and which is I don't know how anybody does it. It really is. There's a good portion of it that's done. I don't know all the details, but there's a good portion of it that's done through mathematical equations. And he loved that part of it because he would sit down at night and he would work sometimes 3 or 4 hours at a stretch, putting these equations together to create these different beautiful, colorful pieces. And that piece, that was one of his pieces that I saw,
Okay.
and it really jumped out at me as looking like a piece of stained glass, like it was a piece of stained glass from a church. When I was living in London, that's one of the things I did when I as kind of like a downtime thing when I wasn't busy with music, and I was studying and doing stained glass. And the instructor that I had, her name was June Standing. She was an amazing woman. She was an amazing stained glass artist. She had been a very busy working actress in the 60s. And it's funny how you fall into meeting these people, that they just like attracts like.
Yeah, for sure.
And she worked with new people. She knew Peter O'Toole, Richard Harris, Sean Connery.
Oh, wow.
I get to meet Sean at one point through her. And she would take everybody her classes from time to time. She would do a little field trip to somewhere to a cathedral or a big church somewhere in England to view the stained glass. And so when this came along and I wound up with a cappella, and I saw this piece, this fractal art of my friend Bud's, I just went, this is it.
Wow.
And
It's perfect.
that's how that came about.
Well, I was so excited to hold a Brenda Bennett album in my hand with your name on it and your spirit all over it. It was just so exciting to just open up the disc player and put that disc in and listen to it.
What was your first thought when
How
the first?
earthy it was. My first thought was, this is because this is an album where I could just drive through the Florida countryside, roll down the window, let the breeze come in. You know,
Ah,
I just felt like I could, at that time in my life when these songs came into my life, it there was so much emotion in the songs. I could find myself in these songs. And this was singer songwriter material, which, I knew Nasty Girl. That's all I knew. I didn't even know about Ken Lyon at that time. So, I knew Bite the Beat. So I'm like, but we all had an intuition that there was so much more to you. And here it was, like, here it was. This was the much more to you that we all knew was there. So I just started playing the album like, there she is. There
yeah,
she is.
there she is, and she's doing it,
Yeah. So
doing it.
let's talk about the track by track if I
Yeah, all
could have
right,
the
sure.
privilege.
Oh, absolutely.
Um and I will also say I was really impressed by the production because it just had such a warm, inviting feel, and the album is so cohesive in its production. Just a great body of work. So the first song is "Say Love," the first song I heard by Brenda Bennett, the solo artist. What's the story behind that song?
Say Love is well, it's a love song. And it was actually a song that I wrote for Keith Urban. When I started getting back into, some music thoughts and what I should be doing or not doing with music, one of the things I had been working, doing, a day job kind of situation, and the head of the engineering department was a musician, and he had a band together, and he had they did country music. And when he found out through the grapevine that I had a career doing music, we got to talk, and so we would compare notes, and we'd have all kinds of chats about music and such. So he had offered me to sit in with his group. He said, it's I don't know if you'd be interested. It's really not the kind of music that you've done, but it's country. But if at any time you feel like you'd like to sit in and do something, we'd love to have you. So I said, oh, thank you. I'll keep that in mind. And so I thought about it. Something came along that kind of pushed me a little, or nudged me, poked me, or something. And I decided, you know what? I think I'll give that a try. And I think it was after Paul, the show that we did for Paul DiChiara, the guitar player from Tombstone. I think it was after that, because that was actually the first thing I had done since I walked away from Prince's organization.
Wow.
And since I came back from working with Dee Harris in London, actually. So, and after I had done that, I thought to myself, okay, you got through that one, Brenda. So what do you think? What do you want to do? You think you want to, maybe this is before I got the call to do the show for Kenny. And do you want to go on and maybe start putting some feelers out to management and so on and so forth, and get the ball rolling a little bit with your musical career, or just what do you want to do about this? And so when I had gotten that offer, and I started thinking about it, and maybe I'll try this, see how it feels. Because it's also one of the things that I thought, having grown up around country music, the simplicity of that, and some of the stories within the music, I thought, maybe that's something I might go to. It's back to my original roots that I was first exposed to musically. it's not a real difficult music
Right.
in terms of, technical for as a singer. So I thought maybe I'll try my hand at country. It's not unfamiliar to me for sure. So I asked him, I went to back to Jim and I said, is that offer still open? And he said, yeah, it is. Why? You want to sit in? And I said, yeah, I think I'd like to. How many numbers would you allow me to do? And he said, how about three? And I
Wow.
said, okay, all right, that sounds good. And he said, just let me know what you're going to do. Either get me a recording of it or, something so I can work and rehearse it with the band for when you sit in. And I said, all right. So I had no idea what was going on in music. And so I found a country station here that was available to listen to. And I started listening, and I hadn't listened to any country stuff in a long time. And I was amazed at what I was hearing. It was sounding more like what we used to call Southern rock,
Right.
with like
Yep.
Leonard Skinner and some of those guys, and even like even though Greg Allman was the Allman Brothers were blues oriented. Country music is white man's blues, really is, and so I thought this has changed. This has certainly changed from the stuff that I was exposed to when I was growing up. And there was a couple of songs that were standing out to me that were on the playlist, the radio station. And I got the name of the artist. And one day when we were in Walmart, my son and I wanted to go to the electronics because he was starting to get involved and interested in playing games, video games. So we went, and I thought, while I'm here, maybe I'll take a look around in the CDs and see if they have any stuff by this artist. And sure enough, they had his most recent album, and it was Keith Urban. So I picked two songs from that album to do, and I picked a Marty Stewart song, and I rehearsed them, and I got the information to Jim so he could rehearse it with the band. And they were doing a gig coming up in about a month and a half later, I think, somewhere around that kind of time frame. And he says, "Okay, so come and sit in with us on such and such." It was a Friday night. It was a Friday or Saturday night, and I thought, "Okay." Um, well, I was nervous. And I got my brother Bruce to come with me. He said, "Bruce, you gotta come with me so for some moral support here." And he's going, "What? What? Brenna, it's like a piece of cake for you. You'll be fine. Once you get behind the microphone, you'll be fine." And I said, "Well, just come with me. I'm kind of nervous. I haven't done this in such a long time that, you know, um, I'm finding myself a little sort of out of place here. Even though I'd done the thing for Paulie DeChera, I was nervous that night.
Right.
So, but he was right, as older brothers can be. And as soon as I got up on the stage behind the microphone, it was fine. It was
Like
fine.
riding a bike, right?
Yes. So, and I had fun. It was great. And I liked singing the songs. And it went over really well. The band was happy. Jim was happy. The people were happy. They came up and complimented me, and that was nice. That felt kind of good. And so I went back and I sat down with my brother, finished a beer, and going, wow, wow, what do you know? Maybe, well, we'll see. We'll just see. Because my son he was getting older, and I was getting a little bit more time to myself to do things um, on my own. But it wasn't quite time to really try and put some kind of career back together and
Right.
go the whole 9 yards. Because as most people who do a career like this know, it's a 24/7 kind of thing. If you're really going to work at it properly and put everything into it, it's you've got to put a lot of everything into it. So I just kind of sat back and wait to see where the cards were going to fall. And then before I knew it, I got that phone call. So in the interim, and when I was starting to, I did take Gertrude out of the case, put new strings on it, you know, started playing around a little bit. And actually, no, I hadn't because my younger brother hadn't passed away yet.
Okay.
Yeah. But I was, even though I hadn't been doing anything, that whole thing from when I was younger, when I was a kid writing poetry, um, I would sit down from time to time. I mean, you're a writer, and you know that, you could be sitting on a park bench at the beach somewhere, or in a park, and all of a sudden, like the lines of a first verse come to you.
And that's it.
And you just, yeah. And sometimes it just comes out of nowhere, or sometimes you'll hear something that'll prompt you to, think of something else. And a person who has the writing ability within them, it sometimes doesn't take much. So I did continue to write some lyric things. And when I met Keith Urban in 2005. This was after I had left working the area that I was in. I was working in a different area
Okay.
of that campus. And I was going to think about, this is what thinking along the thoughts of writing some actual music stuff. And I met him at at one of his shows. And we were talking for just a few minutes. I introduced myself. I didn't really go into my background or any of that kind of stuff. Other than to say, I've had some kind of a career, but I've been raising my son, and I'm thinking about getting back into doing some things, and I'm really not quite sure um, where to start or when to start or if I should start. And I don't know what kind of advice could you give me? And he put his arm around my shoulders, and he was like this far away from my face, and said very quietly to me, he just said, and very simply, if it's in your heart, baby, to do it, then you got to do it. And just the way he said it at that moment in time, how he said it, I mean, everything, it was just like a click, you know?
Yeah.
And I just said, you're right. Yeah. Um, so that song wound up being a song for him, not about him, but for him. I felt that it was something that he could do a good version of it. He did not. I did send it along, and I did hear back, and he liked it, but he did not. It's not something he selected to record himself. So, but that's okay too. Yeah.
Yeah, I love your version of the song. To me, it does have an Allman Brothers feel with that lead guitar. I
Mm.
always felt like it had a little bit of a little bit of an Eagles breezy kind of feel.
Mhm.
I love when the harmonies come in on the chorus. I mean, it's the the verses are kind of mellow, but then it has that big chorus. And to me, a lot of these songs have like that one line that really hit me, and I love the line when the Lord closes a door, He opens up a window, because I feel like that's kind of what was happening in your life right then. You were opening up the
Yeah,
window.
yeah, yeah. You're right. You're right. It's funny because when my son heard the album for the first time, after he listened, well, not for the first time, after he'd been listening to it 3 or 4 times once the album showed up at the house, um, he said to me one day, he says, Mom, this could almost be an album of Christian music because
Okay.
I referred to the Lord in a few different songs. And I said, oh, yeah, I didn't think of it that way. And because certainly wasn't intended that
Right.
way. What you just said about kind of what was things that were going on in my life, it was a change, certainly a new chapter also, so And I had gone through a lot of strife. I'd gone through a lot of things. My younger brother passing tragically away. My mom following him a year later,
Man.
passing away from cancer, inoperable cancer. Um, there was a lot of things. There was a 4 year period of time where things were pretty tough. So there was a lot of fodder for writing,
Right.
came along.
I feel, and the music video just shows you basking in the sunlight, and the song, there's so much light in the song, and then the video has you in the sunlight. So I just felt like you're really just really stepping out into the world and shining as Brenda Bennett, not in someone's band, not doing the background like this is your a cappella. So what a great opening track. I love Say Love. Back in the albums I knew, it was always the Brenda ad libs that we all loved. And right in this first song, like the "Come on now," I'm like, oh, those ad libs, there we are.
There she is.
So
Psych. My heart's in chains.
all right, well, let's move on to track two. My heart's in chains. Follow Me. This was the first single of the album, right?
Yes, it was.
I always felt like it had a little bit of a Ray Charles feel. That sassy Brenda sultriness. What a great song. What's the story behind Follow Me?
Follow Me. Well, it's, one of the things during that period of time was a relationship that I had with somebody, and it was coming to an end, and it was in that period just before the ending of where the frustration is building up pretty strong, and it was getting to the point of, okay, that's it. I'm well done. You can poke me with a fork. I'm well. I can't do this no more. I felt sometimes that, and especially with this situation, that I was doing all the right things for the wrong person.
Right.
And so it was a moment of frustration and despair, in a way of just. I remember going to get into the shower one night, and that first line came out. It's, my heart's in chains. Oh God, somebody set me free. And it went on from there. And but you're right, with the Ray Charles kind of feel. That's kind of what came out in that rhythm, and the musical part of it. It seemed to fit.
Yeah.
With what I was talking about.
Did you do the background vocal arrangements, or did the other singers? Because I love the interplay.
Oh, I did all the arrangements.
Okay, so there's Brenda, the producer.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh, they're so great.
I spent so many years as a backup singer.
Right.
And that is, when Kenny had given me that opportunity to be a part of Tombstone, it was as a backup singer.
Right.
And I really, even though I'd never been in a band before, and I knew going on the stage the first night, I knew that they had gotten a recording contract with CBS Records, which is now Sony. Yeah, it's Sony. It was Columbia Records at the time. I knew the band because I used to go listen to them a lot. I used to love to dance to their music. And so that was a comfort factor. But the other comfort factor was that, okay, I'm only doing backup vocals. And right. I felt comfortable doing it because I had a good ear for harmonies.
Right.
I'd been in choirs and choruses growing up, and I had a good ear for harmonies. So I felt comfortable there in that aspect of things too. So by the time it came around to doing this album, I'd been a backup singer and working with harmonies for such a long time that it was second nature to me. Right. And I had a lot of fun doing that. doing the arrangements for the background vocals. And I had to be careful because I had a tendency to fill up too much space,
Okay.
and I didn't really want to do that because you can do like almost an overkill. You have to leave space for the people to hear
Right.
things around them and not be almost told this is what you're going to hear all the time. You know, you simplify it and leave space so that they can digest it
Right.
and ready for the next moment kind of thing, you know. Sometimes lead guitar players, incredibly good guitar players that play really wonderful leads. For myself, I'll get to a point where it's okay, I'm done. I've had enough. Move on.
Right.
I want to
Right.
hear the lyrics now. Get me, you know, because it's just like bam, damn, da 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 da, you know, and it's
Hmm.
like I gotta breathe
Right.
in the listening portion of things.
Well, when I'm listening to Follow Me in the car, I take the background vocal parts. The
You
woo, yep. And I love that beginning. Is that Mark Tabor? The do 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 do.
down,
So
my
great.
heart's in chains. Yeah,
And
that's
the video is, since that was the first single, that was our introduction to you as Brenda, the solo artist. So I mean, that video went viral in the community, and it's still a hot video. I went back and watched it when I was preparing for this podcast. So what a comeback, Brenda.
oh, thank you. I had a lot of fun doing those videos. They were just thrown together on a Saturday afternoon. The local art gallery gave me the space in their main gallery to use to record. To record um, the visual stuff. My guy Adam Waz came in, and he really hadn't been doing a lot of video stuff yet at that time, and we just kind of collaborated and said, well, let's try this. Okay,
Yeah.
let's try that, you know. And so it's really low budget, but at the same time, we had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun that day. We
And you can see the heart that was put into it. Like sometimes you can have the most biggest budget in the world, but it's crap. You know what I mean?
there's too much going on, or it doesn't
Yeah.
like fit with what the music's doing.
So something I do want to share with the audience is, a lot of us were introduced to you as part of the context of what is now called as the Purple family, which is a great community of artists and freaks or whatever. But I want to say, in my 2 trips to see you in Rhode Island, that's another great community that you're part of, which also has really colorful characters and really interesting people. So I just want to give a little shout out to your scene in Rhode Island. I think it's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
They work hard. They work hard here. I really haven't done other than having done that the last Tombstone stuff that I did with them. I haven't really done a lot of stuff here. I did a CD release show with both of the solo albums,
Mhm.
and they that went over really well.
Yeah.
But as far as doing gigs on a regular basis in any of the places here, I'm not on the road per se. You know,
Right.
I still dabble in some things, but I'm not.
That's because you're like me. We're studio rats. We like to be in the studio.
Child of light, you hold my dreams. Child of
Yep.
Well, track 3, Child of Light, has a little bit of a Celtic feel. Did I say that right? Is that a penny whistle in there, I hear?
There is a penny whistle, man by the name of John Campbell. He came in and played the penny whistle, and he played Indian pipes, Irish bagpipes. And a friend of my son's that he grew up with is playing violin, and his mother is playing cello on that song.
Okay.
And I was playing bodhran. I was doing uh, the drum, and yes, it's definitely a Celtic feel. I have a very close, warm relationship with my Celtic heritage, and that song actually, when my brother Bruce gifted me the 12 string that I have for my birthday, that was the first thing I wrote on it.
Oh, okay.
That song, and that's the feel that felt natural for me to be writing about my son in was that genre, the Celtic sort of music. And yeah.
This song really surprised me for two reasons. Number one, it's in 6/8 time, which you don't hear a lot. And number two, I don't think I'd ever heard your falsetto until this song. During the chorus, you just go into a different range, and I was like, oh shit, okay, she can do that too. It's a beautiful song though, and it's such a nice tribute to your son.
Yeah, I like it. I wanted to have more orchestral type stuff going on, but it didn't work out that way. But I kind of hear some other things going on with that, and he pulled a little surprise. My son pulled a little surprise on me one day. You just so you know, when you raise a child, you have really no idea. You go through all of this, teaching them things, showing them things, driving home, about the importance of this, the importance of that, and you really never know for sure, if anything's getting through.
Sure.
You wonder as a parent, is he ever going to get this? um, and he never really, when he was a baby, he has an affinity to music himself. But as a baby, he didn't like it when I sang. When he was really, he didn't. I know. He didn't like it when I sang. When he got old enough to talk, he was, Mommy, don't do that. Mommy, don't do that. I remember one time saying to him when he was older, what do you mean? People paid a lot of money to hear me sing. But you don't want me to sing. We'd have it was a playful conversation, but still, and he'd look at me like, what? Because he had no idea of this career that I had.
Right.
And so, but he'd been away at college, and after college he was away for a few years in Seattle, Washington, and then he went on to Austin, Texas from there. And when he came, one of the times he came back home, I'm in the pantry, and I was starting to make a supper for us or something. And I all of a sudden hear the sound of my guitar Gertrude, my acoustic being played. And I was like, what? Is that Dylan playing my guitar? So I walked into the bedroom, and there he is. He's sitting on my bed with Gertrude in his arms, and he's playing Child of Light.
Oh.
Yeah. And I just stopped, and because he knows how touchy I am for about that guitar, and I always taught him, you never pick up another musician's instrument without their permission.
Right.
It's just not it's a courtesy situation. You ask permission to touch their instrument, and he just picked it up and was playing. And the first thing I said to him was, "Who said you could play, Gertrude?" And he looked at me and said, "Gertrude did." How can you be mad at something like that? I wasn't mad. I was just so flabbergasted that he was playing guitar, because he never ever wanted to play guitar before. And here, after he'd been away, he's sitting there and he's playing Child of Light on top of it.
Oh.
And I said, "So you're playing that song about you?" And he said, "Yep." So I said, "All right, well, wait a minute, hold on." So I grabbed my other guitar and I said, "Let's play." Because I always wanted to be able to do that with him, but he had played. His first instrument was violin, and then he went on to alto sax and piano, and I had said to him at any point, you want to learn how to play some guitar, I'd love to work, work with you. I'd love to teach you some things. Maybe we could play together. But at that time he said, Mom, I got enough going on. No, not really. But thanks. But when he was away at school, somebody that he was in school with played guitar and was teaching him some things. He didn't have any other instruments around, and he taught himself to play Child of Light. So it was an honor to me that he chose to do that.
And so did you guys play the song? Was that the first song you ever played together? Was Child of Light? Oh, that's so sweet.
Well, it's a cold, stormy night. The rain keeps falling on down.
All right. Well, moving on to the next track. This is a song. The first time I heard it, I'm like, okay, I know this, Brenda, because I was thinking, you're some kind of lover, and now it's a burden of desire.
Oh, yes.
So that we're getting a little sexy here, and there's no greater burden than having that desire for somebody. So that kind of longing and the way it can occupy your mind. Oh, girl, I felt this one. So tell us about Burden of Desire.
Wait a minute. You just said something. I gotta write it down.
Uh-oh.
This is how you write songs.
Yeah. The first time I heard this, I was like, okay, I feel this. It's a blessing and a curse, having that burden of desire.
And yeah, it was some people would be really kind of rude about it, but it was in fact about a period of time, a moment actually, when there was somebody I had met, and I wasn't in the, how do I say this, market? No, not that. I wasn't in the frame of mind. Not sure. It's not that one either.
You weren't on the prowl?
I wasn't on the prowl. I wasn't looking for. I wasn't concerned with having a relationship with anybody.
Right.
And so, but I had met this person who I was extremely attracted to physically, and really attracted to physically. And part of it is true about the song, having a desire for somebody that you're so attracted to that you really, need to make something come to fruition, or you don't know what you're going to do otherwise. You fly out the window or something. But and then some of it is story as well. Is creating a story within your mind about this person. And one of my most favorite lines on the whole album is in that song. And it's a story about, two people being in a place, a pub, a club, more of like a pub type kind of club, music playing, people talking, smoky atmosphere, just people having drinks and just getting comfortable and loose and, relaxed or whatever, and looking across the room, and you're noticing this guy that you've noticed, this guy that you've really taken notice of. You see him taking notice of you. And so the line that's my favorite line in that song is, I saw you looking through the bottom of a glass filled with rum. I love that line. And yeah, Burden of Desire was just, and also about that song, It started with it was one of mine. There's a couple of them on this album where um, and I think Say Love, that's where how I started writing the music to Say Love was tuning the guitar.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, with Burden of Desire, a lot of times when I tune the guitar, I'll play an E chord to see if that's in tune. And sometimes at that point in time, rather, I would play the E chord once I got everything I thought was all set, and then I'd go up the neck and hit the harmonics
Right.
across the neck. And I was checking the tuning one night when I picked up the guitar, and I did that a couple of times with the E chord to the harmonics to the E chord. Whoa, wait a minute, I got something here. And one thing leads to another, and it kind of fell like a puzzle. The pieces fell together, and became that song.
One thing that just came to me when in this discussion is how much you sell the songs as a vocalist, because that desire is coming through your performance. Like, oh, I'm like, you can really feel the desire, and Child of Light has a really sweetness to your performance. So, you know, not only are you telling a story through the lyrics, but you're telling the story through the acting that's coming through your vocal performance. Does that make sense?
Well, that's you just said it, vocal performance.
Right.
That was one thing working with Prince that I developed in a stronger way, and that was to really dynamics, work
Right.
with dynamics. And I think that was one of the things that attracted me to the Beatles music too, is because they had their signature woo, but how they sang too. I mean, John Lennon was my favorite,
Right.
and he had a lot of gravel, but he had a lot of emotion. They all did in their own way,
Right.
their own personalities, and also with that group, each one of their voices sounded so completely different than the other ones, than the other people in that band. But when they sang together, it worked. When they harmonized and they sang together, the sound that was created from those four different sounding voices was amazing. Um, and but there was emotion. They showed emotion. And I think that's one of the things I picked up on.
Yeah.
That and working with Prince, I developed it within my own spirit, within my own mind of,
Right.
portraying the story behind the lyrics. That's what you want to do. When you listen to some classical music, there are a lot of the pieces, the volume will go down. And there'll be this little thing going on over here. Then it builds and it wah ba da ba da da da. And sometimes with a lot of modern music, it'll get up there and it'll just cha 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 cha. You can almost see it on a graph where it's not going through the valleys and
Yeah.
stuff. So with singing, you're telling a story. You are telling a story,
Right.
and you need to put emotion in there. Um, with Burden of Desire, anybody who has ever experienced that kind of a moment in their life, whether it was with their boyfriend, their girlfriend, their husband, a stranger that they see that they are all of a sudden got this attraction to, put that in there. Michael Jackson was really, really good in how he did that, how he
Right.
did, all those little things that you
Right.
would hear him doing. Some people would say, "Oh, he's so silly," or "Oh my goodness, he does all those crazy little things." Yeah, but it's also part and parcel of the dynamic of the dynamics of telling the story of
Right.
getting that across, that emotion across. When I was working on the second album, the second solo album, a good friend of mine, Betsy Listenfeld, she did one of the numbers with me. She and I and Dylan wrote one of the songs on the second album,
Which I
and
love that song, by the way. Oh,
that's my favorite. And we'll
oh,
we'll get there. Um, when she came in, it was a Sunday morning, and she's not really, most musicians really aren't morning people.
Mm-hmm.
But she came in the studio to do her vocal, her part of the vocal. And the stuff I asked her to do, she was looking at me like, what? I don't sing like that. Or I don't want to sing like that. Or why are you making me sing like this? You're pushing me. You're pushing me to the limit here. And I said, that's okay. What you're saying at that moment in the song, needs to bring that across, that emotion across. So when we could listen to it afterwards, she kind of said, oh yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah. So I mean, that's part of the stuff that I love about recording too.
Right.
Like you said, painting the picture of it, painting it with sound.
As a vocalist, there's not a moment on this album where you're on autopilot. Like you're just really in the story from the first song to the last. So
Cry me a river, lay your head upon my breast now. Let me ease your troubled mind.
well, our next song, because I don't want to keep you all night. I could talk about this album for 13 hours, Brenda. So be careful. Cry Me a River.
Oh yeah. Cry me a river.
Cry, cry. There's me singing the background vocals in the car.
Speaking of which, you're singing background vocals on one of the songs of the second album.
Yeah, that's right.
Cry Me a River. That was my least favorite one on the second one. But listening to it now as time has gone by, I see its merits, and I kind of said, oh yeah, okay, I like this. It's all right, yeah. Excuse me. I wrote that. It was in the middle of the hot summer. It was really hot, and windows were open. I had fans. I don't really have central air conditioning. I do now have a little air conditioner I have in my bedroom, but at that time when I wrote that song, there was no air conditioning in the house, and it was hot. It had been humid. Not as humid as Florida.
Yeah, we are humid down here.
You are humid. But it was hot, and I was home in the house by myself. My son had gone off to spend the weekend with some friends on a different part of the island, and I was sleeping. I'd gotten up because it just was so uncomfortable. It was so hot. So I got up, came into the living room, and Sid, one of my guitars, was in the guitar stands in the living room. And I sat down on the couch, and I was just sitting there, fanning myself, and just kind of waiting to be able to go back to sleep again. Mm-hmm. And across the street, I could hear somebody screaming, and it was like my first thought was, is that a fight going on? I mean, I live on a quiet island, and it was unusual to hear something like this happen. And this was at like 2:30 in the morning, somewhere around there. And somebody's really, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. And, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, what didn't they know? And what's going on? Oh my goodness. And they were wailing. I mean, they were so upset, and that went on for a little while. Not too long, because not too long that I felt like I needed to call somebody, but Cry Me a River was written from that night of that experience that night. it's just the story that came to me. Cry me a river. And most of it is, it's not about that particular, because I don't think anything in the lyrics mentions something along that line.
Right.
But that's what prompted that song, with the writing of that song. I walked over and I picked up Sid off the guitar stand, and I sat down and started playing a few chord changes, and it morphed into Cry Me a River.
My favorite part is because the song really builds the "Go on and give them to me." Isn't that in that one?
Oh yeah, that's Adrian backing that one up. Yeah, that girl's got some pipes. Whew, Adrian West. Yeah.
All right, so we are moving.
Come on and give it to me.
Yep.
Day by day she lived her life behind a wall of glass. She built her wall tall and strong. She built it strong to last.
So we are to the second half of the album, which this is the song right here that when I first heard it, you know how you hear a song sometimes and it just kind of devastates you because it's so deep and there's so much emotion in it. And when you did this live in Rhode Island, I must admit I got a little tear in my eye, but this is Jemima. Yep. The story of somebody who has had a lot of hardships, but there's still a light. The thing, the song is such a journey. I love, there's not one, but two guitar solos. And then it ends on a major chord. So after all the pain, there's hope. Brenda, this is my favorite song you've ever written.
Really?
Yeah, and possibly one of my favorite songs ever written, because there's times in my life where I'm the Jemima, and I just want love so badly, and there's so much hurt and so much pain to go through. So this song, thank you for this song. It's gotten me through a lot.
I really like this song. It's the first song one of the guitar players that was in the studio with me when I was recording this album, Noah Witherspoon, this is the first song that he came in and did some of the tracks on. Really good guitar player, and he's a real kind of a blues purist guitar player. He's out in Ohio. He's been back out there for quite some time. He has some of his stuff on Facebook.
Okay.
If you get a chance to listen to him, take a listen, because he's this dude that's smaller than I am. He was like petite and small like Prince was, and but boy could he play, and he had a really nice feel for where to go with what he was going to do. He was this project though, he didn't wind up doing the whole album. There was a couple of songs that he wound up having to leave, and because he was only here temporarily in this area, and he had to leave, so he wasn't able to wind up finishing the whole project with me. But the things that he did play on, there's a couple of them that he wasn't quite sure what to do, because it wasn't the typical stuff that he normally plays. But Jemima was the first guitar recording that he did on this album, and he really liked this song. And yeah,
I almost feel like the guitar is crying in the chorus. Like there's just such a sadness to the tone, but then you have the background singers, and I love that line. No matter how hard she tried, it always hurt.
Mm-hmm. I was just singing this the other day.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. Came to me. No matter how hard she tried, it always hurt.
Mm.
The betrayals and the poison lies, she couldn't make love work.
I'm Jemima. And I know we've talked about this before. I asked you once, I said, are you Jemima? And you told me I got to wait for the book. So I'm waiting for the book.
Yep. I've been writing. It process. You know, I try to carve out some time. I have a canvas on the easel. I've been trying to get that finished. That painting. That and I have started writing, but it's just like I need more than the time of the day.
Right.
I try to carve out some time to sit down. But it, you know, as you know, being in the studio and being a writer and performer, you don't warm up right away.
Yeah.
You know, it takes you a little bit to warm up and get into the rhythm of what you're doing, so that you really feel, okay, I'm locked in and I'm just going to go now. You know, and that's what happens with the writing stuff. Not so much with the writing stuff as with the painting stuff right now. The writing, because I have been writing for a little while now, I've kind of found that little niche where it doesn't take me as long to lock in as it used to.
Right.
Once I start writing, probably because when I started, I was writing longhand on paper in a book, and I just went, this is not going to get me anywhere fast. So I sit down, you know, with a keyboard.
Same here. It's so much better than the longhand.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll stick to the longhand on writing the songs.
I've seen your face 1,000 times in my dreams. I've heard your voice, a whisper so soft against my cheek.
The thing I love, you know, about this album is it's paced so well. You'll have an album with a really full band arrangement, then kind of do something a little bit more sparse afterwards, and it really makes the pacing of the album, you know, a complete body of work. So the next song is "I Will Wait for You," which, you know, Jemima's we can agree it's a very heavy song.
It is. It's a very. I think if it didn't have, because the music, when you listen to just the music, it's not a real. It almost kind of doesn't match with what's being told.
Right.
You know, it kind of just tells it like it is.
Right.
It helps tell the story like it is without making you feel like, oh my God, oh, you know,
right.
like a real blues tragedy kind of, you know. I mean, like you had said when you first mentioned the song, of you know, the story behind the lyrics. This person's really gone through a lot of hard time, and it's true. But I think with the way I wrote the music part to it, it helped you to listen to that story all the way through.
Right.
You get through that story, and not feel like you want to just crawl in a foxhole somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love how the song kind of winds down to the "Don't look back," then it ends on the major chord. It goes into this really beautiful, breezy love song. So I think, you know, "I Will Wait for You," having this as the next song after Jemima, such a nice exhale, like, ah.
Okay.
So what's the story behind this one? I love this song.
Well, the job that I've been working for, you know, since I became a mom, and I'm still in the workforce putting some hours in there, is for the Navy. And so I'm around a military type atmosphere. And one of the things that I've learned is how important the family unit is to our sailors, and most anybody who's in one form of the military or another. And I think it's part of their training too. When they first go into whether it's the Army or the Navy or Marines, that's part of their training is to embrace the family unit,
Right.
to create and to have a family unit themselves, because it's going to help benefit them in a lot of ways. It's going to help them to get through their mission a lot of times. And it was kind of written with that in mind. Women who are married to servicemen they've got a lot of, and this is down through history, thousands of years. It's been the same story, although way back in the thousands of years ago, those wives a lot of time came with them on those treks, those wars, and it was behind the scenes, cooking and cleaning and sexing and cleaning up all the blood and guts and sewing people up or whatever. But as time went on, the story changed, or the position changed in terms of the wife raising the children on their own, formulating situations where they would get together and form these support groups with other Navy wives, other Army wives, to help each other get through, to help each other, because they're separated from their husband,
right?
And they're worried about their husbands. Their husbands are out doing active duty, and they may not come home sometimes, or sometimes when they come home, they may not all come home in one piece. So there's a lot that goes on with that whole scenario, and I wrote that in having that in mind, relationship between a man and a woman.
The thing I love is towards the end, we talked about the acting performances. What is sweet, like the "I wanna lay down beside you," ooh, ooh, ooh. And it's so playfully romantic and cute, and that's just such a nice touch on the song. You know what I mean? It sounds like the song feels. So wonderful job.
Thank you.
So the next song,
I got a lot of when I first this album first came out. There was a number of people that asked to hear that.
I want that played at my wedding. I just got to get a date first. So.
After my brother died, I wasn't able to listen to music or play a song. My guitar lay there in the case getting dusty, the strings getting rusty, and I thought I would go.
All right, the next song might be the most personal song on the album. I always thought of it as an old country blues, "Out of My Mind."
Oh, Out of My Mind. Oh, that is a country blues. It's a gospel-y kind of. I really wanted to have a gospel choir doing some of the background stuff, especially because in a couple of the dynamics. How I run this song through its paces. This was a song about my younger brother, and my mom. My younger brother passed away at 46, and a year later, my mom passed away, and it was part of that 4-year period of time I was telling you about earlier. And when my younger brother died, it was I couldn't do anything. I didn't want to hear. I couldn't listen to any music. The only music I could listen to was classical music. I couldn't listen to anything that had lyrics or vocals, voices singing. Nothing at all in that respect. Classical was the only thing I could listen to. It still brought me some comfort, but it didn't pull out, and maybe to my own detriment, it didn't pull out the grief the way it needed to come out. There's no rules or regulations. There's no set way of what you're supposed to do when you're going through a grief period. You just have to roll with the punches and just let yourself get through it. There's things that you gravitate to that you'll find that'll help to bring you comfort, and it's kind of like the only thing you can really do is grab for things that, gravitate to or towards things that you may feel is going to help bring you relief from the grief. And I, being a songwriter, I knew there was a song in there. I still got some songs in there that haven't come out yet. And in this kind of a situation, with a grief situation, you never know when it's going to come out. And there was a day that I was, my son trained in martial arts for quite a long time. And when he was younger, it must have been, it was after my mom passed away, the following year after my brother passed away. It was a couple of months after my mom passed away. I had taken my son to the dojo to train for his training stuff. And usually I'd stay there. And I didn't this day. I had a couple of errands to run. And so I dropped him off, and it was when I was on these errands that all of a sudden, it was one of those times that, bam, the first couple of sentences at the beginning of the song came into my mind, and it went from there. And that's the thing. I mean, there certainly was enough going on in here and in here that I could just sit myself down with a pen and paper and my guitar and, pull something out. But I've also always had the frame of mind that when it's something like this, you just got to let it happen when it happens.
Yep.
That you've got to let it run its own course, make its own decision of what direction it's going to take. And that's what happened with this. It started coming out that day, and I was on the way back, I think, to the dojo, because I remember I need a piece of paper. So all this stuff was starting to finally loosen up, and come into my mind. And that was about my younger brother and my mom after they'd passed away.
It's such a timeless song. Like, this song could be from 2010 or 1950. You know what I mean? It's really timeless. And I love the line, "Play me a sad song, Mr. DJ tonight." It's just beautiful. Your performance where the song climaxes, where I thought I would go, I feel like your soul's just cracking open and all your grief is just being released right in that pinnacle of the song. This is a powerful song, Brenda.
It is. Yeah. It is, Jeremy. The more you talk about it in that terms, it was, because it was a great relief that helped to break the ice for me. And funny enough, and that's one of the videos that we did that afternoon, and it starts out in black and white. But when it comes to that part that you just mentioned, it turns into color.
And I feel like that's so symbolic of this whole album. You know what I mean? I just feel like you in your life, you had those 4 years, and you're coming out of the darkness, you're coming out of the black and white and going into the color. And I just love this album. I'm so glad I'm keeping it a little bit too late, but we only have 2 songs. We'll get through it.
Walked in the room with a look of desperation in his eyes. He thought for a moment he had a little glimpse of paradise.
Shattered Dreams.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know what's going on there, but dun, 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 like I can feel like Brenda's channeling something on that guitar there. What's going on?
Oh, that was one. There's one of those times that you just like, if you had a wall of glass, or you had a glass window, you had something glass in front of you, you just to hear it break because it was, it was a personal song. Yeah, and it was one of it's kind of like in the same along the same line of how "Follow Me" was written. It was somebody I'd been having a relationship with that I'd been seeing for quite some time, and things just weren't going down the right path. Let's put it that way. And this was a day I was so frustrated. This was the last song that was recorded on the album, or for the album. Not on the album. It's not the last song on the album, but it was the last song that we recorded. And the day that I was heading to the studio was actually the first day that we were going to start doing the mixing. Everything was recorded, and this was it. Everything was done, and we were going to start the mixing process. But I had a situation happen between myself and the person I'd been having a relationship with, and it wasn't pretty. And so I was furious. I was really furious. And I walked into the studio, and just the look on my face, Lori looked at me and said, "All right, what's going on?" And I started heading into the booth, and I said, "I need a track. Give me a track for the guitar, and give me a track for my vocal." And she's like, wait. And she had to do stuff on the board because she was starting to set everything up for the mixing process, right? And she was getting things aligned up and, getting tracks ready for, whichever song we were going to start working on first. And here I come in and it's like, just give me a couple tracks because I was ready to pop a cork. So, I went in and that's what Shattered Dreams came out of. Another moment of release, surrender, release.
I feel that high. We're kind of doing the ooh. It's just almost like a primal scream of release. Like you're just releasing it all out, and then the ooh always remind me a little of Joni Mitchell. That part.
Oh yes, okay, I can see what you're saying. Yes,
but I feel like this song you're just channeling it all right out through the guitar. You can hear like dun, 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 dun. I feel like you could do a heavy metal version of this one.
Well, I don't know about heavy metal as much as like for one thing I would have liked to have done, and I would like to actually revisit this for the music part of it, especially. I don't know if you remember Robert Palmer.
Oh yeah,
Power Station album.
Yeah,
and the sound that he had.
Yeah,
the Power Station was the studio where he recorded that. I believe, and I loved that album. I loved the sound. They loved the sound of the rhythm section, the drums, and the mix on them, and just that really bottom get you in the gut kind of thing, because I'm really drum bass sort of oriented, rhythmic. When I hear tribal drums, it's just like, and that's kind of what I hear this song being able to sound like.
Yeah,
it's something like that. And of course, it didn't come out that way on this album, but that would be really good. Just that the power feeling behind it.
I always have that damn song that I write like the last day that I have to sneak onto the album. The same thing happened in my last album. The bass player was ready to do the final mixes. I'm like, oh, I did the same thing. Let's get to open up a track.
Lori was kind of like, she just scratched her head and sort of like, okay. You know, and when came out of the booth, she said, you know, you all right now? And I just sat down and said, okay, what are we doing? So yeah, that was quite a frustrating time at that moment. And I was on the way to the studio, and it all happened just before I left to go to the studio. So and it took me for a good 45 minutes to almost an hour to get to the studio from where I lived.
Okay.
So I had all that time to build the steam and stew about it, you know. It's like, I can't believe it, you know, and how can this happen? And why did he do that? And, you know, all those kind of crazy things.
And then the next thing you know, dun, 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 dun.
Yeah.
Freezing cold pavement, he stands there again, handing out wisdom for a penny gets in.
All right, well, we have one song left, which was the song that closes the album, was the first one you started recording, correct? Sidewalk Messiah.
It was the first song we recorded, for that album. And it's the last one on the album. Oh, I love the Sidewalk Messiah. I love that song. I really, you know, it's close to a reggae song as I guess I could say that I've written. I like the groove of it.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, you could really, you know, it's one of those things where you could have like 20 people on stage playing it and just have a party with it and just have a really nice, you know, groove going with it. And, you know, when it comes down to it at the end of the day, it's all about the groove, isn't it, you know?
This song always had an interesting place in my life because in my previous job, I worked a lot with the homeless population. And people would come in that were living on the streets, but they were poets, they were philosophers, or they had a story to tell. So I feel like, you know, if you listen to people that are just on the streets talking, there's a lot to learn. So you actually did have a Sidewalk Messiah that the song was about. What was the story behind that?
I did. I mentioned earlier that I spent some time in London, England, working with Dee Harris from the group Fashion. Their big hit album was called Fabrique. And they did a couple of albums, but I worked with him. I was there for 3.5 years, and we wrote and recorded together. One of the songs that we did together is on the second solo album that we'll be talking about. But when I came home back to the States, I was back here in Rhode Island because I had some family here that I hadn't seen in quite a while, and I was kind of like a feather on the breeze. I really didn't know what I was going to be doing yet, so I was back here to visit with some family, try and get my coordinates, you know, try and get something solid under my feet to figure out what I was going to do, because I was back here, period. I might have gone back to England, you know, at that time. That was the thought was that, yeah, I'll probably at some point go back and visit, but I was done doing what I did there, and I was back here in the States, and I needed to pick up, which you really can't do, but pick up my career where I left off. But in the meantime, it was a coldish, raw, rainy April day, and I went up to the east side of Providence. The east side of Providence is called College Hill, and it's some really cool history. Edgar Allan Poe used to spend a lot of time up there. H.P. Lovecraft was from Rhode Island. He spent a lot of time in different places up on College Hill. Brown University's up there, RISD, the Rhode Island School of Design, which is internationally known. It's the best art school in the country, actually, in this country, and there's a nice vibe up there. And I hadn't been up there in quite some time, and so I decided take a run up to Thayer Street up on College Hill on the east side of Providence. So I came around the corner of the Brown bookstore, and across the street there was a shop, and there was quite a few people that seemed to be out walking on the streets, a lot of students that day. And there was a man across the street. Now, Thayer Street isn't that wide of a street. It's a small colonial sort of area. And I noticed him at first when I came around the corner of the bookstore, the building. I noticed that there was this man standing on a soapbox across the street in front of one of the stores. And he was talking. He was pontificating away about something. And so then I slowed down and I started to just kind of look and watch what was going on, and to see how people were reacting. He was very striking looking. He was a tall, slender black man, had dreadlocks almost to his waist, and they were gray. He wasn't a young guy. And I just stood there against the building for a while, listening and watching. I couldn't hear exactly what he was saying. I could hear the sound of his voice, but I couldn't hear exactly what he was saying. And he had a sheaf of papers in his arm, and he was trying to hand them out to people as they were walking by. And a few people took them, but most people just kept walking by. And so I was really curious. It aroused my curiosity. I started thinking, what is he talking about? What is he passing out? It didn't look like it was a poster of any kind, because those were all over the place about different things in that area. So I walked across the street, and I walked by him, and he handed out one of the pieces of paper to me, and I took it. And I just stood there looking at it, and I looked up at him. He had incredibly beautiful eyes. They were real goldish green color, big round eyes, and you could almost get lost in them, really. And so I just kind of looked at him, and I nodded, and I sort of said thank you, and I kept walking. And some of the lyrics in the story in this song is from what he had written on that paper.
Oh.
Yeah. And I still have the paper. I still have it. And he was a sidewalk messiah. And that's where that came from.
I love the lead guitar work on this song too.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh, yeah, I know. Ooh. And I love the whoa, like the climax there.
Yeah, yeah. And I love how what Noah's doing with the guitar at the very end. The escalation, de-escalation, kind of what he's doing there. It's really it's a really nice way to end that story.
Yeah.
And it was funny because Noah had been gifted the guitar that he played on that song. He had been gifted that guitar. It was a Gibson, and it was a black. I can't remember the model. Sorry. I should, but I don't. And it was an old Gibson electric, and he was so excited. It was one of those situations where somebody had it in their closet for many years or under the bed for many years or something, and they never played it anymore. And oh, you're a guitar player? Here, would you like to have this?
Oh, yeah.
Let's take this. And he was just, oh, what? You're gonna give it to me? And so he was so excited when he came in the studio that morning or that day rather, to do that song. He brought that in with him. He wanted to use that guitar. Now, and so I looked at it and I said, okay, have you played it yet? Have you played it through an amplifier or a system yet? And he said, nope, this is going to be the first time. And he looked at me and we both kind of, uh-oh. How long has this guitar been in the closet? Because electric guitars, they sometimes don't last as well as like an acoustic guitar, just because of the electronics, the pickups, the wires and the buttons and the knobs and stuff like that. It's really sort of a crapshoot. You have no idea what's gonna happen, and it certainly needed to be set up. Do a setup on it, because he put new strings on it, so that was a plus. But as he was playing, it was so this is credit to this man's talent as a player. As he was playing, he'd tune up the guitar. Sometimes when things really need to have a fix on an electric guitar, it'll play in tune at one end of the neck,
Right.
but it won't play in tune at the other end of the neck. And as he's playing what he was playing, he started out in tune, but it started going out of tune while he was playing and recording it. So this guy was playing it into tune.
Oh.
Without turning the knobs, if you can understand that.
Right. So was he bending the strings to keep him?
He was bending. Oh my gosh, he was bending strings. And he was kind of. This was a tough song for him. When I had mentioned that earlier, not only because of what he was going through with the guitar, and he was determined he was going to do it on that guitar. But it was this song. He had a hard time grabbing a groove with his playing, getting into the rhythm of the groove with it. And I was a little bit surprised about that, but I think it may have wound up being a combination of stuff that day. But I was happy with what he did.
Yeah, I love it.
I was happy with it. But I really like it. Poor Dylan used to hear me play that when I got I had started taking my guitar out and playing the guitar. He would hear me in my room playing that song so many times. I love playing it, because I just love the rhythm of and it's fun, and you smile, and it makes you feel good.
And Dylan's in the video, right? Drawing.
Yep, he is. He's drawing a picture of the Sidewalk Messiah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, Brenda, I know I kept you a little bit later than we're supposed to, but this is definitely an album that deserves to be talked about. And, I loved all the work that I grew up listening to you, but I feel like all that stuff was really leading up to this point. I think this is an album I really think people need to hear. When I think of Brenda Bennett, now that I've gotten to know your work and gotten to know you, it's Brenda Bennett, vocalist, songwriter, producer, guitarist. I mean, and artist, So
I'm going to I think I want to re-record a couple of these numbers.
Yeah.
Revisit them, and with a different studio situation, and just kind of perk them up a little bit or something.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to do that. Which ones would you think?
Well, I feel like Shattered Dreams, you got to do the Robert Palmer.
Okay, all right.
I could see the Sidewalk Messiah getting another chance to get up on that soapbox.
Uh-huh.
And I feel like you really want to do that full orchestra on Child of Light.
Oh, okay. I was going to say Jemima, but I think I'd like to leave Jemima as it is.
I feel like that moment of sorrow she's in her time and place where she needs to be.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think that that needs to be where it is.
Yeah.
But who knows? We'll see.
Well,
I'll sit down with my man George and see what he has to say. Because he always hears things a little differently, and it points different pockets of stuff. He'll like, ooh, wait a minute, I hear this, or what do you think?
Speaking of George, he's going to be a big part of the next podcast when we talk about your second album once again, which was such a major release, Grammy nominated, correct?
Yeah, four categories, 3 categories.
Yeah. Oh, these two albums, I've just listened to them so many times, so I can't wait for people to have the opportunity to revisit. And were you happy with A Capella when it came out? Did it do what you expected?
I It did more than I expected, because when I went into doing the project, um, I had said this earlier that, in thinking about doing the project, um, I asked myself why I was doing it, and I figured at the time that, with the availability of how things were technically were starting to happen for people, somebody to put out a record of their own. um, I thought, well, wait a minute. Am I going to have anybody who's going to listen to this thing? Because I'd been away from the limelight for such a long time
Right.
that, and I still kind of like, people get frustrated with me, and I know that you've kind of said to me, oh, for heaven's sakes, Brenda, of course this, or of course that. I forget about, the people who have been fans of what I've done. Not that it's an easy to forget kind of thing, but it's just I go about my day-to-day life, and just, brush my teeth, make my bed, cook my food, just do a normal day. But but I had asked myself, what am I going to do with this? Is there anybody that's going to listen to this? Is there anybody that's going to like it? Because for me, I don't this and this kind of talks for itself in that sense, and that is, um, I'm not following any particular genre of music.
Right.
I was exposed to so much different stuff, different genres growing up, that it left me with, being, open-minded. And to me, a song, if a song is a good song, that's more important to me.
Right.
So whether it's a good song or not, whether it's a country song, whether it's a jazz number, whether it's, you know, a heavy metal, rock and roll. I love Rammstein, you know. If it's a good song, it's a good song. And I
Right.
think there is enough different stuff on this in that way, in genres, that there's bound to be somebody out there who would like it. And I was really surprised. I was really surprised at the reaction that I got, once the word got out that I had released this. Um, like you had said earlier, like, she's back,
Yeah.
singing again, and I think it was more that than anything else. Initially, was that, oh, she's singing again. That's great. Um, my ex-husband Roy, he was so pleased I did
Oh,
something. He was always a big fan of mine. Long before we were married, he was always he was very happy that I was doing something again. And he was happy when I did, once again, also. So the next album. So it felt good. It was kind of a justification, or validation, I guess you could say is a better word to use, of, my efforts, that it was worth doing. You know. I was glad to do it just because of the fact that I felt that I could, and of course being in the studio,
right.
I was happy with that. But I just, I had a lot of talks with myself and the universe and the powers that be, saying, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to put it out there. I'm not going to just keep it at home. So yeah, I was pleased, and I was surprised that I got a really good response on that.
Well, Brenda, thank you so much for giving me the privilege of talking about one of my favorite albums of all time, track by track. I mean, I just love every song. It's such a journey. The music really led you where you needed to go. Uh, just, oh, I'm a fan. I'm a friend. I just love you. That's all I can say.
Oh, Jeremy, thank you so much for having me. This was great, and I really enjoyed it. Um, Thank you.
Well, I
And
propose let's do this once again.
okay. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Well, you can find Brenda online. Your music is on all streaming services, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And
I don't know so much about a cappella. I think it's there. It's just I think once again is been when that came out, that's been more in the forefront than a cappella. But
right.
both of them they are available to listen to through the streaming. Most all of the same engines, search engines will bring it up for you.
All right. Well, everyone get familiar with a cappella, and then go listen to Once Again, because that's the one we're going to be talking about next.
All right.
All right. Well, I love you, Brenda. Thanks for chatting with me.
Love you too, sweetie.
Talk to you soon. Bye.